Welcome back to another episode of the Media Pass. I'm your host, Alex, joined as always by your other host, Matt. Matt, how you doing?
Alex. I'm doing pretty good, man. Just a heads up for the people who watch my Instagram reels on Analyst. I am wearing the same shirt as I was yesterday when I recorded a reel for Analyst. So, I mean, you could judge me. I do have more than one shirt. I can verify that, but I've been looking at myself in the camera. I'm like, man, you haven't changed shirts in the last couple of days. So such is life of a at-home worker.
I didn't even know you did Instagram reels. This is the first I'm hearing of this.
For Analyst. You should check them out, man.
Sweet. I'm going to sink some time into watching those today. Let's
Are you
do
on
some
Instagram?
Questions. Am I on Instagram?
Yeah.
On a personal level, yes, I'm on Instagram, but on a professional level, no.
Don't you think we should? I mean, I feel like we're friends, man. Shouldn't we be following each other on Instagram?
Yeah, probably.
I follow a lot of like my NBA Twitter friends on Instagram, like S. I have him on Instagram. Samson. He's got a lot of good content on his personal account. Who else? I guess those are really the only two. Maybe there's more. Oh, Matt Moderno, the Wizards guy. Yeah, great guy. Good Instagram follow. But yeah, I feel like we should be there, man.
Probably, yeah. We're probably past that point. I have if you search AlexHoops on Instagram, I exist. I have an account. It's from back when. Here's some lore for the audience. The first thing that I ever did with basketball media was not the YouTube channel. It wasn't writing or anything like that. I had an Instagram page where I would post news and stats and stuff. And I grew that to 17,000 followers. And that was the first thing I ever did with basketball content. And then eventually I was I'm starting a YouTube channel. And it used to be called, it had multiple different names. At first it was called The Hoop Society. Then it was called NBA Throne. And then eventually it's Alex Hoops now. And I've lost 10,000 followers because I stopped posting and a bunch of people followed me for news and stuff. And I don't post that obviously. So I think I have one picture up there, but yeah. That's
you were an aggregator?
Uh-huh. Yeah. I was an aggregator, dirty aggregator.
Can I tell you a funny story? It's something that happened to me at the Combine. I'm going to be very discreet about the characters in this story because it does involve people that we know. And I can expunge those to you afterwards. But basically, somebody who has a lot of pull at the Professional Basketball Writers Association, this guy that he came up to me about is very notorious for aggregating content. And so he comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, do you know if he's here at the Combine?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think he is." He's like, "Because we at the Professional Basketball Writers Association want to have a conversation with him because what he's doing, not great for actual journalists." And I was like, "Oh, well, let me know how that plays out." It was just funny because I've always looked at this account and I've always wondered, I'm like, what is your goal here? Because you don't do anything except for just tweet the things that you heard on the Woj pod. He doesn't really work for any. It's not like he's trying to be I don't know. I just don't get the end game with that account. But it was funny that the PBWA, Professional Basketball Writers Association, is searching for this guy. They got a bounty hunter at the Combine looking for him. But yeah, try to bleep that out, please. Those two characters don't need to be expunged.
Yeah, I will bleep those two names out. If you're listening right now, sorry, you get the
you get the gist of it, though. Yeah, you get the gist of it.
Let's do a little question action because we do have a few. Wilson has joined the pod, my cat, for those who are not familiar with the lore of the podcast, the recurring characters. Let's see here. You got many congratulations on graduating law school.
Thank you.
I don't know if you read the comments, but
I did. I'm a diligent reader of the comments.
Perfect. Here's the first comment question from Volta Dumar. Don't know if I'm saying that right, but frequent commenter both on the Media Pass and on my channel. So thank you. I haven't seen anyone talking about this, but do you think there will be cross matching in this series, referring to Minnesota and Dallas? The Mavericks absolutely want Derrick Jones Jr. guarding Ant, but the Wolves seemingly want Ant guarding Kyrie, and will probably put Gobert on Derrick Jones Jr., right? We kind of covered this on the last pod, but you want to take point on this?
There's like cross matching in every game. I mean, teams try to do that, but I don't see this as like a huge cross match series because I can't like look at one team and be like, yeah, they just have so much more size than the other team. Like with Denver and Miami last year, right? In the NBA Finals, like that was like a huge cross match series because like Miami was just a lot smaller than Denver. You know, Aaron Gordon would do his like little transition rim runs and get like Kyle Lowry in like a post seal and score on him. So that was like more of like a cross match centric series, whereas like this series will have like, I feel like just an average, the ordinary amount of cross matches, whatever that number is. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think like the series will be won on the backs of cross matches. Like it's something that will happen just naturally. And, you know, there's a billion points of emphasis that teams are going to make over the course of a series. And even if that's one of them, I don't think it's going to be like the deciding factor. But yeah, definitely something to always keep an eye on because it's one of those things like on the margins that teams will try to clean up and extract whatever they can. Such as the playoffs, like that's going to happen anywhere. Let's see. Next question from Ian Kernut, 3350, frequent commenter. Shout out to him. Congrats on graduating law school, Matt. Love the content as usual. Thank you for the compliments on the content, and thank you on behalf of Matt for congratulating him on graduating law school. The question
thank you
comes
for speaking
from Jason.
On my behalf, Alex.
You're welcome. I didn't want to just thank him for the compliment on the content. I was like, I should also thank him for congratulating you on your behalf. Even though you could do it, you're right here. This question comes from Jason Kidd, coaching the Mavs in the Western Conference Finals. What current player do you think would make a good coach once he retires?
I mean, I still don't know why Rondo doesn't. I mean, maybe he's just not like that personable of a guy, but I
get like the vibe that that's probably the case.
Yeah, but it's weird because he's like such a good teammate. So I don't know. I could see Russell Westbrook being a good assistant coach, just because like he's like everyone loves him like as a teammate, and he's just like such a passionate guy and animated guy. I don't know how great his. I mean, I'm sure he's got an excellent understanding of like tactics and X's and O's. He's an NBA player and he played the point guard position. I mean Jalen Brunson for sure, right?
I could see that for sure. I'd never thought of it until literally just right this second, but I could see that for sure.
Jalen Brunson's a good one. I think Halliburton, pretty good one.
I would say those are good answers. I would also make the argument that I feel like a lot of the times it's the players that you don't expect. Like, let's look at like, did anyone think that Steve Kerr was going to be like this insane head coach? Like I was a fetus back then when they won their last championship. So it's like, I don't really know what people were saying about him at the time, but were people looking at him and saying like, oh, he's going to be an amazing coach someday?
I mean, I'm a year younger than you, so I was even less than a fetus. I didn't even exist in like this timeline. But I mean, that's so. Who's like just like a role player, journeyman, well respected? Because I feel like the journeyman element is important because you get to see so many different styles, so many different contexts. You get to meet so many different players.
Ish Smith.
No.
He's the ultimate journeyman.
I mean, not Chris Paul. I feel like he'd be something. I
feel like he would rub people the wrong way.
Yeah. He's too attention to detail oriented for his own good. This is tough. This is not good podcasting, just like pontificating.
Like, did people think Doc Rivers when he was playing? Were they like, "Oh, Doc Rivers is going to be a great coach someday"?
Like, dude, he was like that dude. Like,
no, I know he was great, but like,
he was. Oh man, I'm just gonna pull some. When you're reading the next question, I'm gonna pull up a nice Doc Rivers stat for you. But,
all right, well, we'll move on to the next question.
Before we move on to the next question, though, I need to say this because I'm sure you've seen on Twitter the Dom 2K tweet that keeps getting quote tweeted about like how Instagram and TikTok will make you think like any player was like a go.
It's like Quincy AC highlight reels.
I saw Darvin Ham's mixtape. I did not know he was like that. I did not know that, man.
Oh, man. Lance Stevenson has a ton of highlights like that where you're like, oh, yeah, this is the greatest player to ever step foot on the hardwood.
He was at least a double-digit scorer. I did not know Darvin. Right. The way he's built now, like his body, like he's kind of built like my dad, dude. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Like he used to be able to do stuff like that?
So do we move on to the next question, or are you still finding this Doc Rivers thing?
I mean, I could pull it right now. I could pull the trigger right now if the audience will let me. So I'd spend a lot of time. The fans of the show know I spend a lot of time on the Thinking Basketball database for the historical stuff. And how about this? Ready? 1986 to the 1987 season with the Atlanta Hawks in box plus minus the Thinking Basketball version. Doc Rivers, 99th percentile. In 1989, 97th percentile. 1998, 97th percentile. 1986, 95th percentile. 92nd percentile in 1985. And then 1993 with the New York Knicks, he's also in the 92nd percentile. That guy was a baller. Just saying.
I did not expect like Doc Rivers player propaganda on this podcast, but here we are. Next question that we have. There's a lot to process in this comment. I'm just going to skip to the question from Steamy Ramen 7743. Thank you for all the kind words that you said in the comments. We really do appreciate it. But for the sake of time, we're just going to skip to the question. As a Bucks fan, this hurts to ask, but do you guys think Spicy P is a lot higher in player rankings than his time on the Raptors had us believe he was? He's been pretty good.
So we're going to get into this with the game 2 stuff, but right. I feel like last episode we touched on it a little bit where it's like, honestly, I've kind of realized like he's, like the defense isn't like what it was kind of lauded to be. At least what you like think based on his reputation. I think it's fallen off significantly. And like offensively, like I think he's a really nice complementary player, but like that skill set in today's game with all the talent we have, I know he's like a top 40 player, but I'm not going to say he's a top 25. Like, I don't think when we do our top 25 rankings after the season, like he would be in it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, probably not.
He might be, maybe on the fringes, but would you take Pascal Siakam over Kristaps Porzingis? Yeah, exactly. No. Exactly. So
I think here's a better one.
Okay.
Actually, no, I'm going to put that one in the pocket.
Are you thinking about Drew Holiday right now?
I would probably take Pascal Siakam over Drew Holiday.
Oh, really?
They're in a similar enough of a tier that I'm like, if I have to choose between either of them, I'm not like overwhelmingly disappointed with either choice. It's like, oh, cool. I get one of Pascal Siakam or Drew Holiday. It's not like one or the other. I'm like, oh crap, I got Drew Holiday, or I got Siakam.
Did you see that touch pass? The touch pass that Drew Holiday made in transition yesterday to I can't remember. It might have been Jaylen Brown. It was like a transition touch pass, left-handed touch pass. He looked like Jokic. Literally looked like Jokic.
I vaguely know what you're talking about. I'm gonna have to go back and find the clip. Yeah. But I feel like he does crap like that all the time, and I'm like, come on, man, where'd you pull that from? Who taught you that? Just pulling that stuff out of nowhere. You can't be doing that. It's like in Semi-Pro when Jackie Moon. I love that movie. Yeah, when Jackie Moon dunks the ball and Father Pat's like, people don't just go flying through the air like that, Jackie. That's how I feel when Drew Holiday makes a touch pass. I'm like, come on, what are we doing here?
Do you know? I'm sorry, I'm so distracted, but this is a funny story. It's worth telling. You know, Woody Harrelson's dad like killed like a federal judge and is doing a lifetime sentence in prison.
I did know that because
and
Woody Harrelson's one of my favorite actors.
Have you seen the interview that he thinks that like he was set up by the CIA?
I did not know that.
I'm gonna have to send you. You guys should all look this up in your free time. But there's like a clip of him like interviewing. He's like sitting in the chair, crisscross applesauce, and like in a chair having a formal interview. But he's sitting crisscross applesauce, and he's just like, "Yeah, the CIA did it. Like they framed my dad." He's basically saying they who's the guy? Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy who killed JFK. Similar situation.
Huh. Yeah. Well, we'll unpack that in a later episode. A bonus episode. We'll just dive into the Woody Harrelson's father conspiracy theory. Great. This one's from Behind the Arc YT, frequent commenter, supporter of the channel, supporter of all of our work. Really appreciate it. Great episode, guys. My question is, who do you think is the bigger X factor for this series? Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Derrick Jones Jr.? How you feeling about that?
I feel like it's your turn to answer first. I've been doing a lot of sidebar.
So I think this is going to be a series where defensively we kind of know what we're getting from the Timberwolves. I think what is going to be most important is the Timberwolves being able to match Dallas's offense. Obviously, both defenses are going to be trying to take certain things away. But ultimately, I think what's more important than Nickeil Alexander-Walker, like playing the defense that he does, I think that is something very much like in his control, and you kind of know what you're getting. It's going to be good. He's going to play good defense 95% of the time, probably, if not higher. It's going to be, is he knocking down his spot up threes? What is his shot selection, decision making like on the other end? When he's attacking a closeout, is he, tunnel vision on getting to the rim and trying to finish? Is he looking for the guy open on the perimeter? What's his process looking like? And that's like kind of what I'm looking at with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. It's like, we know offensively he can hit his shots. He's kind of turned into a good enough shooter at this point that I'm like, yeah, I trust Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the corners. But then I look at Derrick Jones Jr. and I'm like, that's much more of a wild card to me. And even if you look in the last series, I tweeted this, like, it feels like Derrick Jones Jr. shot way better in that Thunder series than he actually did. Because if you look at the numbers, Derrick Jones Jr. really didn't shoot that well from three. Like, not really at all. And so now I'm looking at this series and I'm like, okay, even though it felt like he shot really well last series, he really didn't. So this series, what's it going to look like if it feels like he isn't shooting well and he actually isn't shooting well? Like, that could be really, really, really bad. And that's when you start getting into the territory of like, is somebody getting played off the floor? Like we've talked about before, Derrick Jones Jr. is able to offset that with his physicality, his rebounding, all of those little things that kind of negate the fact that you might not be able to hit your corner threes at a high rate. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like Derrick Jones Jr. is probably the bigger factor because I feel like the floor for Nickeil Alexander-Walker is like, you may get some shaky offensive decision making sometimes, but you're going to get great defense, and he's probably gonna. You trust him enough to believe in his corner threes, whereas Derrick Jones Jr., it's like you may get the corner threes, you may not. You don't know. It's a total dice roll. So that's where I'm at with that. Probably, I would say Derrick Jones Jr. is probably the bigger X factor.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you there. Honestly, I think the other thing to think about is like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is kind of like in some ways, the Jaden McDaniels insurance, right? Like he plays a very similar role to him. I know he's a little bit smaller. He does a little bit more ball handling, but it's in theory, that's basically what it is, right? Whereas like Derek Jones Jr. is the Jaden McDaniels to the Dallas Mavericks. Like, they kind of need him, and they don't have as good of a backup plan as the T-Wolves do with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. As much as I love me some Josh Green. He's wildly inconsistent and still like very, very out of control.
We're going to have to talk about Josh Green a little bit. Like when we get into the
weeds.
We're 20 minutes in. We're not even into the, meat and potatoes of the pod.
You timestamp these, right? Please. I hope you timestamp these. People would just they would lose us. We would lose them.
Matt, I don't timestamp these.
Really?
At all. I never do. Damn. I've had somebody commented once and they were like, can you please add chapters? And I was like, all right, I'll do it for this episode. So I sat down for 10 minutes and did the stupid chapters. And I just don't.
Is it hard? I have no idea. Is it a hard thing to do?
It's extremely easy. It's incredibly easy. I'm just a piece of garbage, apparently. Maybe I'll add chapters for now that we're addressing it on the podcast, and I'm kind of like looking like a complete loser, being like, I'm not making chapters. Maybe I'll do it now, but it's
my fault
easy.
For bringing up Woody Harrelson. It's my fault.
Yeah, we'll have to, timestamp that specifically so people can just move on to the next chapter, because that was very unrelated. I guess it's adjacent enough. Anyways. Let's keep it moving. We're 21 minutes in. We're not even done with the questions yet. All right. Next question is from Pino Blue Vogel 6458. I much appreciate another update. I was thinking of throwing a question in the last podcast comments that I just listened to today, but this came a lot sooner than I expected. So I'll save. This wasn't even a question. So I'll save for another time when I have something more relevant. I'm just going to cut that out because that was not a question.
No, it's good content. Good content, man. Just timestamp it.
Yeah. The last question is from NILLOC1401. I wasn't even going to try and say that. What do you think about Kevin O'Connor's idea that OKC should draft Zach Edey?
So I actually have 3 games I downloaded I watched Zach Edey a fair bit. He plays Michigan State twice a year, so I watch those games pretty intently. And then, I watched him in the tournament. But I have 3 games queued up. I'm going to watch him sometime next week just because I actually want to answer this very question. But what do you think, Alex?
So I think my vision with OKC in the whole center debate, you can watch my video that I posted yesterday and see some specific stuff that I say about this conversation. But I think there are cheaper options. Not saying Zach Edey is going to be expensive, but there's a lot of extra stuff that comes with Zach Edey. He did a lot of post stuff in college. And I don't really think that fits well. I understand he can do the kind of rim running thing, but when I'm looking at this backup 5 for OKC, I want someone who is going to have such a diluted role that is an extreme level of specific that yes, the only thing they're going to be doing is screening, rolling to the basket, doing those Gortat screens, and getting rebounds. That's all I'm interested in. That's all I want out of a backup center. I don't need him to be a post scorer. I don't need him to do all this extra stuff. Just a few things that I want you to do well. And Zach Edey probably just has a little bit too much extra that I'm not really interested in. So I think you can probably get a more specific guy like Nick Richards. I'm going to be plastering this all over the internet, saying how much I think OKC should go after Nick Richards. Nick Claxton would be good. I would like Isaiah Hartenstein. Who else? Yeah, I mean, those guys are Nick Claxton, Isaiah Hartenstein, or Nick Richards. I'm good. I'm happy.
Those are 3 different. I
don't need all the Zach Edey stuff.
Could we just? I know you don't mean this, but Nick Richards is on a different plane of a basketball player than Nick Claxton and Isaiah Hartenstein. Different plane for now. Until his genesis, his evolution.
Well, my whole thing with Nick Richards is obviously like Isaiah Hartenstein or Nick Claxton would be better, like overwhelmingly so. But Nick Richards is making $15 million over the next 3 years. Like he's on the dirtest of cheapest contracts. So that's why I'm like, from a value perspective, I think OKC retains a ton of flexibility. They can get him outright without having to give up like matching salaries and stuff. And I think like the value he provides on the court, rebounding wise, screening wise, doing the rim running thing. And I think in the context of OKC's defense, he could perform effectively. That's why I'm like so Nick Richards pilled right now. But what do you think? Should OKC get Zach Edey?
I don't know yet. I haven't done my research.
You don't want to just give an uneducated take?
I try my best not to, man. Believe it or not, despite some people, despite what the city of Orlando might think of me, I usually have a lot. They do, man. They really do. But yeah. All
right. Well, we're done with the questions now. If you left a question, thank you so much. We really do appreciate all the kind words and the questions. They're always entertaining, fun to read, and gets the podcast started off on the right foot. I say as we're 30 minutes in already. Matt, give me the pulse on the Pacers Celtics series, because we started to talk a little bit before the podcast, and then I told you, wait, hold on. This is good content. Let's save it. So now it's been 30 minutes since that conversation. Give me your thoughts on Pacers Celtics.
The pulse is that federal judge that Woody Harrelson's dad KO'd, man. That's the pulse right now. I have no disrespect to the Pacers fans or the family of the judge that was assassinated by Woody Harrelson's father. Yeah, I mean, it's not like, first of all, like, did you notice like Rick Carlisle just like they were like, oh, down 17 with like 9 minutes left. Yep. Throwing the towel in.
Dude. So literally this happened during the regular season. Mm-hmm. Hold on. I tweeted about it.
Should I talk about Doc Rivers while you're?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to try and find this.
Yeah. I'm kidding. But, while Alex is finding the tweet, they just, okay. First of all, if Halliburton misses any time, like this is over, you know, put a pin in it. What's the face?
So how much were they down when they kind of waved the white flag last night?
I think it was 17. I remember they took Siakam out. I could pull up the play-by-play stuff, but continue.
Literally, December 13th, 2023, I tweeted, I'm a little confused why the Pacers are seemingly waving the white flag when they were down 17 with 6 minutes left. Yeah, so, like, potentially the same scenario.
So, Siakam comes out of the game with 9:25 left. The score is 99-82. So, it's a 17-point game. We got to clip this. This is social. This is social or short. This is going to get clipped. This is big. But, yeah, I was just like I thought it was over. But I'm like, you're not supposed to think that. Like, you're an NBA team. You're supposed to have this unwavering confidence. You never know what's going to happen. You know what? The New York Knicks wouldn't have quit. I'll tell you that. They wouldn't have quit this game.
To a fault.
Yeah. Like, it would have killed
just
them.
Like foolishly banging your head against the wall, down 35 with 2 minutes left. Like, we might be able to pull this off. It could happen. We just need Jalen Brunson to make like 7 threes. We'll be okay. It's not a good thing, but like, I admire it.
It's kind of like us. Like, we keep talking, even though nothing insightful is coming out of our mouths. This is a really drunk episode, but if Halliburton misses any time, this is cooked. By the way, this came to my mind after what happened game one. When they lost the way they did, I immediately thought back to that. I think it was 2018 Cleveland versus Golden State. Remember LeBron James pitches like the perfect game of all perfect games in game one of the NBA Finals. Literally doesn't make a single bad decision. And then J.R. Smith makes a pretty bad decision, and they end up losing game one, right? But like when you're that heavy of an underdog and you lose a game that you basically already won, and that means you basically have to win 5 times in 7 games, like that usually ends in a sweep, at least from my recollection, anytime you see anything like that. And so even with how resilient this Pacers team is, even with how dynamic their offense is, like it's just a really hard hill to climb. And then like this Boston team is just, I wrote an article about it this morning. They're too skilled. Okay. They can do something that other teams can't. We talked about this in the preview. They don't need to run all these screening actions to get Halliburton in the action so they can hunt him. They can hunt him with whoever he's guarding. Like if Holiday's guarding, if he's on Holiday, Holiday can score on him. You've seen he's averaging 22 points and 9 assists. If Derek White is the one he's guarding, Derek White can score on him. Lord, like God forbid Brown or Tatum has him in their sight lines. Like, dude, I was watching that third quarter. And like, I'm not into all the narratives and stuff. We don't do that here. But like, I would get it if Halliburton checked himself out of that game because he just had enough. Because I've never in my life seen anyone get hunted that bad. Ever, dude. Every single possession was created. Like it was an open shot or an easy shot just created because Halliburton was on the floor. And I just don't know how you fix that. Right. And then there's what they're doing with changing the matchups, putting Horford on Siakam and putting a smaller guy on Turner because Turner's not that good at bullying mismatches, at least relative to other guys his size. That defangs the Turner Halliburton pick and roll, which is a lot more dynamic than the Halliburton Siakam pick and roll because you can't pick and pop as well with Siakam. And we saw it last night. We mentioned the Siakam thing. Like, even though Siakam played incredible, it was still like a pretty handed victory. And it's because you can live with Siakam's like mid-range scoring. Like it's not going to break the defense. They're not going to send a second defender. So he's not creating any offense for anyone other than himself. And he's just hitting a lot of tough middies that, he probably won't continue to hit at the rate he hit last night. And so, yeah, the pulse is just not there.
Yeah, going back to the whole like waving the white flag, the excuse that was given was, I think Rick Carlisle said something along the lines of, I wanted to see some other guys and like try and get them going, see what else we could try, which like, I understand if you're in the first game of the series, or even if you like won the first game of the series, or if you're not the underdog and you're like, okay, well, we can afford to try something because we're pretty confident in our ability to overcome this battle. But this whole offseason or this whole postseason, I've kind of looked at this Pacers team, and even during the regular season, I'm like, their offense is so deadly because it can catch fire at any given moment. They can rattle off. Same with the Celtics. The Pacers can rattle off 5 threes, and then all of a sudden they close a 15-point gap. If they're getting stops or if Boston's offense goes cold, like the Pacers are never really out of it until like they're down, 30 with, 2 minutes left. Like they can do some crazy stuff just by nature of volume 3-point shooting and like the amount of offensive firepower they have on their team, even against Boston's defense, which Boston has done a great job defensively this series. Credit to them. But yeah, I just don't understand giving up like that. Especially like you're already down a game in the series. So I don't know. It was weird. It was weird to say the least. And even when they were down 17, I did not feel like they were out of it. Like it still felt like the game was still ebbing and flowing. Like we had not seen, even when they gave up, they would still get it to like a respectable amount. And it would be like, oh, they got it down to like 13 at one point with like 5 minutes left. I was like, what are we doing? Like, this game's not over. This game is far from over. So it was weird. Very weird. Bizarre.
Yeah, I was going to say, something funny I put in my notes is like, and I'm still waiting for Obi Toppin to like slow down because I feel like he's just been like just playing out of body this whole postseason. But I wrote in my notes, I'm like, where would they be without Obi Toppin, which is like not a good thing to be relying on. But he had like a really nice night, 11 points, 4 for 6 shooting from the floor, was like much better defensively than he usually is. And I'm just like, he's like hitting these pull up midi jumpers in the fourth quarter to cut the lead to like 12. And I'm like, I don't even know what's going on here. Andrew Nembhard continues to be impressive. I'm telling you, man, this guy, like I think he's going to be something more than just a role player.
Well, here's a fun question.
Go ahead, please.
That we can kind of chew on a little bit and unpack, because we're running out of things to talk about with this series if the Pacers are going to be waving the white flag down 17 with 9 minutes left. Andrew Nembhard. Let's go ahead and look at what he did this season, because this season he already improved a ton from his rookie season. 9 points a game, shot 50% from the field, 35, 36-ish% from three. The passing has really, really popped. He's had some really tough defensive matchups throughout the playoffs so far. In your opinion, let's project 5 years down the line. How many points and assists? This is reductive, but just to like kind of gauge where you're feeling his ceiling is at. Not necessarily ceiling, but where he could potentially reach. How many points and assists is Andrew Nembhard averaging in 5 years?
I could see him being close to like a 2010 guy, to be honest. Just like, and I'm saying that because I think there's like a world, because there's like this new developing trend I've been noticing where it's like this type of guard who's just like, he played at a big school, he played in a lot of big games, really heady player, great footwork. Like these guys like go from being like late draft picks in the late first round, early second round to being like all-stars. And I really think Nembhard might be next in line. Another guy like I kind of see like that is like Brendan Pajemski. These just really skilled guards who they just keep getting better and better every single year. They're such high IQ players. And so I could definitely see like in 5 years from now, he might have like an all-star at the very, like not the very least, but I'm saying like, he's not that dissimilar from Derek White. I mean, Derek White's a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, a little bit longer, but Nembhard's also he's much better footwork. He's better on-ball scorer than Derek White, to be honest. So yeah, no, I think the future is really bright for him. He was he was hunting Tatum last night, like seeking out Jason freaking Tatum. And Tatum has not looked good defensively in this series. I don't know what's going on with him, but yeah, no, Nembhard, he's not afraid, man.
No, and you talked about the on-ball scoring. I think, like, you look at what he was doing in the mid-range this year, in his second season, like, he shot 50%, according to Cleaning the Glass, he shot 50% in long mid-range shots on 68 total attempts. Small-ish sample size, but that's enough to where I'm like, there's some juice there for sure. And that totally passes the eye test. Like, the dude is a demon in the mid-range. And then that floater, like, his floater's really coming along. That's up to 49% on much higher volume, 156 total attempts. His efficiency at the rim, which, like, is something that I've realized is, like, that's a major swing skill for guards. Is like, it's one thing if you're scoring on the perimeter. It's one thing if you're scoring in the mid-range, but like I look at this with Darius Garland as like Darius Garland has been able to do all the aspects of scoring outside of the paint. Like he had that crazy pull-up mid-range season, that crazy pull-up three-point shooting season. Overall has just been like an efficient guy since his rookie season. But always like the thing that's popped with, or like stuck out, not necessarily popped, but stuck out with Darius Garland is like, he just can't finish very well. And then I look at a guy, I'm not comparing the two like directly, but just more of something like monitoring on ball guards. Like, look at their rim efficiency, because if they're capable of finishing at the rim consistently off the dribble, like with the ball in their hands, create that rim pressure, generate those paint touches, score off the drive, like that's going to unlock everything else, because you're a much more difficult player to defend. And like matchup wise, teams have to be much more deliberate about who they're putting on you. And so I'm with you. Like 20 points a game seems very much attainable for a guy like him. And then, you know, with a guy who has the passing chops that he does, I think everything else will come along naturally, just by nature of his scoring being realized. So yeah, I'm with you. Andrew Nembhard has been throughout the playoffs just a dog.
Yeah, love him. Hat tip to you, Andrew.
Yeah, he's also in the 100th percentile for finishing at the rim in the playoffs. 78%. He has missed 8 shots at the rim, according to
how many has he
Glass.
taken? So 26?
37?
Oh, wow. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
So among all players, is in the 100th percentile, or are you looking at just guards?
100th percentile for combo guards.
Okay, wow.
Still pretty dang good.
Yeah, I like that.
So is there anything else you want to say about the Pacers Celtics? Or do you think that there's not a whole lot to say?
The one thing I want to ask, if you have a quick answer, If you don't, we'll move along. But do you think you've seen anything from Boston that in the next round could be exploited, other than the Tatum thing we just kind of alluded to?
Yeah, I think not necessarily exploited, but it's always been the case. And Tatum has not been efficient this postseason at all. The scoring has left a lot to be desired. And it was weird because he was starting to really, like, you look at after the start of the new year, Tatum's pull-up three-point shooting had gotten to a point where you're like, oh, crap, like he's doing it for real now. Like he was one of the best pull-up three-point shooters in the league. And then now you look and it's back in the toilet. Overall, his efficiency has not been great. The mid-range stuff has been pretty good, which has always been something that's shaky with Tatum. He's finishing really well, but I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like it's going to get to a point where teams are just going to, and I think Boston has done a good job of avoiding letting teams live with things running through Tatum. Boston's used Tatum as a screener a lot, which has been really effective in opening things up for other guys. But I'm just kind of curious to see how things continue to go for Tatum with the ball in his hands, because it has not been great a lot of the times. And I wonder how much of a pressure point that's going to be. But I don't know if that's like, I don't really see anything that I'm like, this is overwhelmingly exploitable. Sorry, this is way longer of an answer than you probably anticipated, but I don't, not necessarily exploitable, but it's just something I'm watching with Tatum is like, he's been pretty bad. Yeah, no,
I'm with you. And again, that's why I'm wondering if he's hurt, because he just did not look right physically. Like he was getting blown by. Like I think there's a play, maybe I'm not remembering, but Obi Toppin like blew by him without a ball screen. And I'm just like,
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
People call Jason Tatum like one of the best defenders of his generation, like, so for this to be happening, it's kind of like, interesting. Yeah. There's that. And then I think obviously there's like the Kristaps question. If he never actually comes back and is never healthy, the Horford, we're starting to see the age on Horford a little bit in defense. Indiana was having a ton of success hunting him in game 1. Boston came back by changing the matchups, and that made things difficult on them. But Yeah, so I think those are really the two main pressure points right now for Dallas or Minnesota, who have played one game, maybe two by the time you're listening to this. Not 100% sure, but Alex, as the resident expert on the Minnesota Timberwolves, what are your main takeaways from game one?
This game was weird because Minnesota shot incredibly from three and they lost, and Dallas just demolished them in the paint, which you're sitting there, you're thinking the Minnesota Timberwolves have Rudy Gobert on their team. They've been one of the best interior defenses in the league this season. So how was Dallas able to just abuse them in the paint? And if you ask Stan Van Gundy, he's going to tell you it's because of drop coverage, baby. It's all drop coverage's fault. But the funny thing is, I thought, yes, the shots that Luka was making or that Luka was taking off of drop coverage, they went in. So everyone's going to be like, wow, drop coverage is awful. But if Luka was missing those shots, everyone's looking at drop coverage and being like, that's why you do drop coverage, because you know those are the shots that you want people taking. They're low percentage, pull up mid-range jumpers. That's what you want to live with. And throughout the entire game, I'm seeing Luka take these shots, and I'm like, it's Luka, so they might go in. They'll probably go in. But it's better than selling out on what? Are you going to send a double team at Luka in the mid-range? Are you going to pull Rudy Gobert up to the level of the screen because you don't want to give up a Luka Doncic mid-range? Well, then let's take that and let's say, okay, Rudy Gobert plays up to the level of the screen. Luka's, if they're not switching Rudy Gobert onto Luka Doncic. That's not going to happen. Anyone who's they should switch that matchup. Okay, then you're going to have Luka get pretty much a guaranteed advantage. Somebody's going to get something at the rim, or somebody's going to be open on the perimeter, which are both higher percentage looks than a Luka Doncic mid-range. So I ask anyone who's critiquing the drop coverage by Minnesota, I would implore you to go through the mental exercise of saying, okay, well, if they're not going to operate in Rudy Gobert drop coverage, what would they do instead? Because I think that is a good way to kind of, figure out the philosophy behind why they're using drop coverage, even though it seems you're watching the game, you're like, they're just giving Luka Doncic open mid-range shots. And it's like, well, yeah, because they don't want to give up spot up threes and they don't want to give up shots at the rim. Now, where the discussion to me becomes fruitful for debate and unpacking a little bit more is you say, okay, they're operating in the pick and roll in drop coverage because they don't want to give up shots at the rim and they don't want to give up spot up threes. Well, if that's the case, then how did they get demolished in the paint? Because in theory, you're supposed to get away with not, you should have a better chance of protecting the rim if you're in that drop coverage. So how did that happen? And I think Dallas did a good job of getting Rudy Gobert out of position, because even if you're in drop coverage, you're not necessarily guaranteed to be near the rim. If Rudy's matchup is the one screening for Luka, then it doesn't really matter. Rudy Gobert is not going to be near the paint, even if he's in drop coverage. So who's that secondary rim protector? And this is something I was talking about going back to the Denver matchup. I was saying, Minnesota's kind of struggled at times when they don't have a secondary rim protector when Rudy Gobert gets pulled out. So I think it gets tough because there's different fingers that there's different players that you can point a finger at and say, well, this guy needs to make sure that he's sealing off the man on the dunker spot better and making sure that those guys aren't getting easy lobs. And I agree with that. That's true. You could say, Rudy Gobert needs to operate in a deeper drop so that he's available in the paint, even if you're giving up, Luka has more space to work with. Well, and then Jaden McDaniels needs to be better fighting over these screens, or Anthony Edwards needs to be better fighting over these screens, whoever. Nickeil Alexander-Walker needs to be better fighting over the screens and doing that rear view contest a little bit better. And all of those things are true. And my point with all of this was, this is a very long-winded answer and a long-winded way of me saying it is not one single thing that is to blame for why Minnesota got demolished in the paint. It's a lot of things that just like little paper cuts that caused you to bleed out is, I think, the best way to describe it. And Chris Finch said this in a press conference recently. I think the report came out yesterday where he was like, said something about the team didn't know that the Western Conference Finals had started, but they do now, or after that film session, they know now. And I hate to say that a lot of this is effort related, but some of it is effort related. Like, are you sealing off the man in the dunker spot and boxing them out to make sure that they can't, get that easy lob? Are you leaving your feet to contest that? I will critique Rudy Gobert here. There's been a lot of times in the playoffs where Rudy Gobert will not leave his feet to contest a shot. And I'm sitting there like, what are you doing? Why didn't you contest that? And there's an argument of like, well, he doesn't want to, get baited into a foul. I get that to a certain extent, but there's still been some stuff that I'm like, come on, man, get a hand up. Like, please, it's okay to leave your feet. All of that is to say, I think Minnesota needs to clean up those little things that cause those paper cuts. And that's going to clean up a lot of the problems that they have in the paint, because right now they seem lazy. And I don't know if it seems lazy because it's actually laziness or if it's a process thing of like, they're not being told to do the things that they're supposed to be doing, or they're like, well, we don't want to give up this thing, so we're not going to have them do this. I don't know, but I think tonight we're going to see, like, are those things going to change, or are they going to be consistent points of pain for Minnesota in this series?
Yeah, a couple things I want to say. One is just for everyone in the audience, Minnesota's still in a pretty good spot. Like Opt Analysts, the company I mentioned earlier that I work for, has a projection model. And even though Minnesota's down 1-0 in the series and has conceded the home court advantage, they still have them as a 51% chance of winning the series. So that tells you, like, they're still definitely in this series. Nothing's changed in that front. We're not in the Indiana Boston world right now. One thing that Joe Verrier, mutual friend of ours on Twitter, does great analysis on the Golden State Warriors, and right now at the league at large, because there is no Warriors to watch. He pointed out how much harder it is to run drop coverage against empty corner pick and roll, which is what Dallas is doing a lot of, because Gafford and Lively have, like, maybe are they two of the top 5 best, like, lob rate catch radius guys in the NBA? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can throw the ball up really high, and it's just going to be a really tough play for Gobert to make, because it's like he's playing cornerback, but also, like, there's a chance he's like playing cornerback, but he's also like spying on the QB who might be getting ready to scramble outside of the pocket. And right before the quarterback passes the line of scrimmage and becomes like an eligible man running downfield, he lofts the pass. He lofts a little lob pass to the guy the cornerback's guarding. That's basically what's happening. And Luka, he's the master of craft and deception and guile and all that stuff, right? And so when you have no empty corner, when the corner is empty, there's no low man tagging the roller. And so it's a tough play to make for Gobert. And Joe did, that they should probably switch the coverages against the empty corner stuff. And then obviously when you do have the corner filled, the drop coverage is a lot more tenable. The other thing to mention here with the paint stuff is the Minnesota Timberwolves, the only 3 players who did not have a negative plus minus. You want to guess who they are without checking the box score?
Kyle Anderson.
He's one of them. He had a +0. He's a +0, so he's a neutral. Who are the other 2 guys?
Naz Reid?
No. I'll give you two more guesses.
Just go ahead and tell me.
It's Conley and Gobert. So Conley had a +1,
Okay.
which is, it's nothing, 3-point loss, and then Gobert is a +10. So everybody else is a negative. What does that tell us? That tells us that when Gobert is on the floor, he was on the floor for 38 minutes. He only sat for 1 minute the entire fourth quarter. Dallas went on like a mini 6-0 run in that 1 minute. He was off the floor. So in the 38 minutes Gobert was on the floor, Minnesota's a +10. It's the 10 minutes that he's off the court where they're a -13 that really lost them the game. So when he's on the floor, the paint's pretty decently protected. Okay. And going back to what you said about the drop coverage and playing the results, you know how I know people would do that? Exactly what you prophesized. Remember game 1 against the Clippers when Zubac was in a drop and Terrence Mann was playing really good on-ball defense like Jaden McDaniels did, and Luka was missing his shots? And everyone's like, man, like, look at Zubac, such a valuable drop defender, all this and that. And the same thing happened in game 4 when the Clippers won that game, playing the results. And trust me, I know for a 1,000,000% fact that Rudy Gobert is a better drop defender than Ivica Zubac, and that Jaden McDaniels is a better screen navigator than Terrence Mann, as much as I love those two players. Okay. So I'm sorry, Stan. And Stan even walked it back. You heard him in the fourth quarter. He's like, maybe I was a little too hard on the drop coverage. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little bit overblown. I don't think it's something that they can just scrap. I do think there needs to be a little bit more coverage versatility. That's just the nature of the beast when you're playing a guy like Luka Doncic, who even the most tenacious defender we've seen, the most tenacious defense we've seen in the last half decade, can't really rattle him. So I think there's that. The other thing that I'm paying attention to, okay, Anthony Edwards took 2 shots at the rim in game 1. We know from the OKC series that this team, this Dallas Mavericks defense, it's gotten to the level where they can prevent elite paint scorers from getting into the paint. Shea went 2 games without hitting a shot at the rim, according to dunks and threes, right? So we know that. Anthony Edwards, this postseason, something interesting has been going on where he's just been like a wickedly good pull-up shooter, right? So in the playoffs, he's averaging 10.6 field goal attempts that are pull-ups, according to NBA.com tracking data. And he's shooting 53.1% field goal percentage, which basically combines 2s and 3s, weighs them equally, right? And that'd be like, okay, if he was like that type of shooter all the time, I'd be like, that's in his bag, that's in his arsenal, that's how he counters the overloads, the paint packing, right? But the thing is, he's not always been that good of a pull-up shooter. In the regular season, he took 9.4 pull-ups per game, and his field goal percentage was 44%, so 9 percentage points lower than what is in the playoffs. In game 1, he took 12 threes, 2 mid-rangers. He was just combined 6 for 14. Not all of those were pull-ups. I think he took a couple spot-up threes. But my thing here that I'm really curious about with him going forward in this series is if he can't get into the paint, if he can't get to the rim. He's been awesome. In the Dallas series, he was awesome getting to the rim, finishing. But if he can't, this is a much better rim-protecting team, like we said. Is the pull-up finally going to regress to the mean? And if that does happen, what does that mean for this Minnesota offense? Because I think what we've established in our conversation is their defense is like, there's some little things that need to be fixed, but their defense is fine. This defense is great. Like, this defense is at the level it needs to be at for them to win this series. The question is, can their offense get to that level? And I'm worried about Ant in this series and what a shooting regression for him might do to this team.
Yeah, that would be a big problem.
He was settling a lot in game 1 too. I did not like his process.
He looked exhausted, and hopefully it's not an injury thing, and hopefully it was just a recovery thing. Obviously, they were coming off the Western Conference Finals or not the semifinals. So you would hope he has enough time to recover from that. And there's obviously only a one day break between game 1 of the Western Conference Finals and tonight when you're hearing this. So we'll see. I think, tonight we're going to find out is this a regression thing? Is this an injury thing? I think we'll probably get a clearer picture of what this is going to look like tonight. If Dallas wins this game tonight, it's their series to lose at that point. But I still anticipate this being a long series, even if Dallas wins this tonight. Now, how confident I am in that will depend on, how Anthony Edwards looks. How does the Minnesota defense kind of clean up around the edges, and what kind of impact does that have? And will it be enough to, overwhelmingly shift the needle? But is there anything else you want to say about this matchup before we start to wrap things up?
I have a couple more things, honestly. I think I got a little bit more gas left in the tank, if that's cool with you.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, one thing, you asked me, or maybe I asked you, it's all a blur now, but last episode, okay, if you haven't listened to that, check that out. Also watch Alex's OKC video. I forgot to say that earlier, but you should do it.
Thank you.
You asked me, or I asked you, who do we like for the series? Neither one of us, we were being coy. We didn't want to give an answer. But in the back of my head, I kind of favored Minnesota. And so earlier this week, I looked at each team's role player 3-point shooting percentage on the season. So what I defined as a role player has not made an all-star team in the last 3 years. And then I also made one exception for Jamal Murray, because he should have made an all-star team during that time span. He is definitely an all-star. He's the best player to ever not make an all-star team. And so what I found was that the Dallas Mavericks, compared to their regular season shooting, are 2 percentage points higher on role player 3-point shooting in the postseason. So the role players are shooting a little bit above their head. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Timberwolves are shooting 6.6% lower than the regular season average. Their role players are, right? So that's a huge regression, okay? And we talk about like averages, and I know there's a lot of postseasons that happen where you never get the regression to the mean. Look at the Miami Heat last year. They never really regressed to the mean. Maybe a little bit in the finals. But so I'm looking at in this series, and I'm like, I see Minnesota's role players like Jaden McDaniels. I see him like just catching fire, because he's had kind of a shaky 3-point shooting playoffs, right? And he did it. He did exactly what I thought. And I see Derrick Jones Jr. missing a lot of threes. I see PJ Washington missing a lot of threes. And they did it. And the Minnesota Timberwolves outshot the Dallas Mavericks by 14%. And they lost. Isn't that kind of scary? Like, if you're Minnesota, like you can beat this team that's, some of the reason they beat the Thunder is because of shooting variance. You couldn't beat them, and you outshot them by 14%. That's a little bit concerning, because I don't know how many more 6-for-8 3-point games Jaden McDaniels has in his back pocket. I love him. He's a great player, one of the best role players of this postseason, but I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm going to be interested to see is, because even in those games that you look at, and I understand that this game one was like, it was a 3-point loss. It was hardly anything. But you look at those Thunder games, and Dallas was kind of squeaking by in those as well, even when they were shooting out of their minds. So I think even though this game for the Timberwolves, they kind of wasted a really good shooting variance game, where you're like, man, you got to capitalize on those nights where you're just shooting lights out. I still think like, okay, you only lost by 3. And if you look at those games where Dallas was shooting lights out, OKC was still in those games. And I think for all intents and purposes, the Timberwolves are a better team than the Thunder. I worry about the Timberwolves' flaws less than I worry about the Thunder's. Than I worried about the Thunders in that matchup. I think Minnesota's offense is more bulletproof, and I say that not like literally it is not bulletproof. It's not like a flawless offense by any means, but there's more tried and true things that they can go to. They're not relying on gimmicks or anything like that. It's like, yes, it either works or it doesn't. Like, yes, you either have these advantages or you don't. Whereas with the Thunder, it's like, okay, well, if the gimmick's not working, then you're kind of screwed because you don't really have anything else. So I think for the Timberwolves, it's just going to be a matter of like, okay, you need to trust what's gotten you here. offensively. Like Ant's going to have to be able to consistently put pressure on the rim, especially like you look at like Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. Minnesota's got to get them in foul trouble. Like you got to be aggressive, just pressuring them, because even if you're missing shots and things aren't falling, even just getting those guys to where like, oh, 2 fouls in the first quarter, he can only come in with like 3 minutes left in the second. You know, that stuff, you have more time to operate and try and build a lead. And this is one of the beautiful things about the Dallas Mavericks that was really genius of them. And one of the things I will sing their praises for with this Daniel Gafford trade, being able to have one of these guys get in foul trouble and you can just put basically another version of that same player on the floor. Like, it doesn't get better than that. Daniel Gafford has 4 fouls in the third quarter. Who cares? We have Derek Lively we'll throw out there. He'll do the exact same thing that Daniel Gafford's going to do with better defense, in my opinion, and more offensive juice. Kind of a different discussion. But yeah, I think Minnesota's got a lot on their plate tonight to kind of move some needles and apply some pressure in some particular areas that I think were very much lacking in game one.
Yeah, real quick thing about that. Here, I was going to pull it up. But again, the phenomenon continues with Dallas being significantly better with Lively on the court. Lively plus 19 in 26.5 minutes. Gafford minus 15 in 21.5 minutes. But that was another thing I had in my notes where it's like Dallas never has to worry about those 10 minutes without Gobert because they always have it. They never have to worry about that dip, right? So, yeah, that's, like you said, it's ingenious team building. I thought it wasn't that valuable to always have like an average center on the floor, like in the league, like, you know, because like, would you say either one of these guys is a better center than like Zubac or Hartenstein?
Derek Lively, I think, will be, but not right now.
Yeah, but the thing is, you get 48 minutes of like them, right? As opposed to like you only get like 34 minutes of Hartenstein or Zubac or whatever, and they can get in foul trouble. So that's super valuable. The other thing I wanted to ask you about before we get out of here, another thing where I was like kind of Minnesota had the clear advantage coming into this series for me was bench, right? I know even though like Nickeil Alexander and Naz Reid are like a little bit inconsistent at times, still like having those two as your two main guys off the bench is just a huge advantage. They've had the bench advantage in every series they've been in so far. How did you feel about Dallas's bench in game one and what they got out of it outside of Lively, who is awesome?
I feel like this is a cop-out, but I'll be completely honest. I did not have like, I didn't come away from, and this may be a good thing to have to say about Dallas's bench, but there was nothing like overwhelming about their bench that I was like, oh, this was like amazing, or oh, this was bad. Like I felt like maybe I'm completely off, but I felt like their bench did their job pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about their bench?
I mean, yeah, I kind of like, I didn't have any like grandiose takeaways. I love every second of the Josh Green experience. Jaden Hardy is kind of the guy who stands out to me the most, though, just because he continues to like be able to give like good 8 to 12 minutes. I was so unimpressed by him in the regular season. So to see this from him in the playoffs, you know, being able to tack off the catch and, you know, connector passes and play a little bit of middle pick and roll, pretty impressive. But the only reason I asked is because you made a little, you smiled when I mentioned Josh Green's name earlier in the show for those who are not watching on YouTube. And so I was wondering if you had. He's
just a wrecking ball, man.
He's
just everywhere.
He reminds me so much of my own pickup game because it's like he's like out of control, like, and like nobody really can tell what he's going to do, including himself. And so yeah, Josh Green, man, I love you. I hope you know.
I'm glad you shouted out Jaden Hardy because now that you mention it, I am like, oh yeah, he did kind of pop in those minutes. Also, this is just kind of funny. I'm not like extracting a ton of information from this, but it is interesting to me, and probably just coincides when he was on the floor with Derek Lively. But Tim Hardaway Jr. in 10 minutes was a +7. And I'm like, it's unusual. But
he was great in the OKC series. Like, he was just guarding Chet, and like Chet was like, okay, I guess I'm shut down now. I guess I can't do anything anymore.
Yeah, lock Chet Holmgren in a gym until he can punish a mismatch like consistently. My goodness, you're 6 feet taller than him, man.
I want to say this again. You mentioned, I heard my take last week. We'll get out after this, I promise. But remember my take last episode about how the rule change hurt the Thunder the most, right? I swear, dude, when I deep scouted them in January, like, Chet used to be able to punish mismatches because defenders couldn't be as physical with him. They would get called foul. Like, I remember teams would always try to late switch the pick and pop to take away his pop, and he'd be able to drive that, like, no problem, absorb the contact, get into like a reactive spin move and finish because defenders couldn't be as physical. So I don't know. In the old rules, I think Chet was good enough to handle those kind of matchups, but I think now with the real NBA, with the real men out there,
90s hoops.
He can't fight with the big dogs anymore.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but he's just going to have to adapt, and I think that was going to have to be a natural progression for him, anyways. Is just being more like cognitive when he's playing off the catch and understanding like you can't go through people, you got to go around them. Like, you need to be more of a finesse player, at least for now, because you aren't strong enough to, you can't just bully through guys. And your handle's definitely not there to bully through guys yet. But, this is about the Western Conference Finals. We're not talking about those loser teams that are out of the playoffs now. Matt, anything else before we get out of here?
Should we just eulogize the Pacers right now or wait until next week?
Let's wait.
Good.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Hey, I've said it, whole playoffs, anything can happen.
You can. So, that's true.
Thank you all so much for listening. Be sure to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever you're listening on. It really does help us out a ton. We really, really appreciate it. Be sure to subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a like on the episode. Jeez. We've been talking so much. I need water. Leave a comment with a question if you want us to answer it at the beginning of next episode. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at AlexHoops_, at Mat Issa 15, MATISSA 15. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.